great seeking mind and courageous spirit. That is the story of Sessendoji. You'll appreciate, I hope, that when we use the term Buddhist gods, we mean in fact the forces of the universe, the influences of the universe which affect our lives. So the sun, for example, is a Buddhist god because the sun has a very profound influence on every living thing, including every human being. So the Buddhist god is an influence. What is this story really all about? Firstly, it emphasizes this matter of having a seeking mind. Now this is important for us too. In other words, it is not wrong to have doubts. In a sense you could say it's right to have doubts. Buddhism is not about blind belief, blind faith. Through having doubts, we develop a seeking mind. If, and it's a big if, we challenge the doubts and determine to solve the doubts rather than letting those doubts fester inside us. So I believe because we have been brought up in other religions, we can feel guilty because we have doubts. That's not right. It's natural to have doubts, provided that we take up the challenge and determine to solve them. And this, of course, we can do through our daimoku, through asking others who have practiced Buddhism for longer, through reading, through studying the Gosho. Always we can find the answer. This is the incredible confidence of this Buddhism, isn't it? That it actually says to people it's natural to have doubts. And there is an answer which is totally satisfactory to you, which you will find if you seek it. And the seeking of it is very important. So in this way I really feel Buddhism differs totally from any other religion I've ever heard of. Because Buddhism is virtually saying through that principle that the teachings can answer anything that you ask. There is a logical, reasonable, sensible answer which you can totally relate to. And I'm sure many of you have had experience of that. Some big doubt comes into your mind and it really disturbs you. So when you get the answer, somehow it's so totally, deeply satisfying. Or perhaps you can't relate to it immediately, but you chant daimoku about it, and then the true meaning of that answer becomes clear. So don't feel guilty about doubts, but challenge them instead. To feel guilty about doubts is nothing else but a waste of your life force. So this is the example, of course, that Sessendoji gives. His determination. Of course he'd have doubts. That's why he was wandering about in the jungle trying to think things out. And that's why he took up the challenge of the demon, because he wanted to satisfy that doubt. So every day in Gongyo you recite what is a famous phrase, or should be, Ishin Yokken Butsu Fuji Shakushinyo. You all remember it? In the Jigage portion of the sutra, Ishin Yokken Butsu Fuji Shakushinyo. It's nice words to say, aren't they? That means yearning always to see the Buddha. I do not begrudge my life. Yearning always to see the Buddha. I do not begrudge my life. So, speaking personally, I try hard every time I do Gongyo, to remember the meaning of that phrase at least once during that Gongyo. Because I can then say to myself, naturally, Dick Causton, have you really got that spirit today? And if you haven't got it, you better jolly well galvanize it up into your life again. So it's very useful to me to understand that phrase, Fuji Shakashinya, Ishin Yokken Butsu Fuji Shakashinya. So maybe you could try it every time you recite Gongro. At least once in the 5 times you say those words in the morning and the 3 times in the evening, at least once to remind yourself, have I got that spirit? Am I really seeking and not begrudging my life in doing so? Isn't it? So in the New Year Gosho, which probably many of you read in the UK Express or you studied it, Nichiren Daishonin said this: we common mortals can see neither our own eyebrows, which are so close, nor heaven in the distance. Likewise, we do not see that the Buddha exists in our hearts. We do not see that the Buddha exists in our hearts. Theoretically, we read about it in the Gosho and in guidance, but actually we don't see or feel that the Buddha actually exists in our hearts, or to put it another way, that the Gosho lives within us. And the Gosho which Nichiren Daishonin inscribed is to show us that, like an incredible, wonderful, precious instrument that we can use to discover that the Buddha actually exists in our hearts. So of course, it's a very common thing for human beings to look for their object of devotion outside of themselves. Some people devote themselves to money, others to their wife or husband or to girlfriends, some even to golf or their motor cars. Everyone wants an object of devotion, don't they? That's how they set their values for everything, based on that object of devotion. If a person's object of devotion is golf, then their whole day, their whole sense of values, their relationship with everyone is based on whether they can get to the golf club next Sunday. And our whole life is organized around that event, including time to polish the clubs, go and buy new golf balls, practice their swing in the drawing room, and so on. So every human being makes an object of worship, even though it may not be a religious one. So this is why Nichiren Daishonin, of course, in the Gosho, says, the importance, or explains the importance of human beings having the correct object of worship. That is to say, an object of worship which is absolute and unchanging. All these other objects of worship, like golf, can change. It can rain on Sunday after all those plans that he's made during the week to go and play his round of golf. The wife you depend on may get sick, and you can't depend on her in the same way anymore. But the Gosho is absolute and constant and unchanging. And furthermore, the purpose of that Gosho is to act like a mirror. This is what Nichiren Daishonin said, didn't he? It's like a mirror. At first, when you look at it and practice to it, it's dirty and tarnished. But as you practice over the weeks and months and years, so you polish that mirror and clean it. In other words, you're clearing that clutter of rubbishy karma, which is preventing you from seeing your true self in the mirror. And the true self that you see in the mirror is that the Buddha exists in your heart and nowhere else. That the Buddha is your life. Or if you like, you are a Buddha if you like to make the effort to clear the clutter and become so. So in other words, through practicing the Gonzan, you actually, as in a mirror, see your own eyebrows. And you see, in the words of that Gosho, heaven in the distance. You can take in the fact that actually Buddhahood exists in you. So of course this comes through a combination of experience, the qualities of Buddhahood appearing in your life, in the ordinary circumstances of your daily round, plus your gradually understanding the Gosho, and most of all through seeing yourself, your true self, clearing away that karma which up to now has prevented one from doing so. So the Buddha actually does exist in our hearts. And our whole purpose of the Gonzan and of our practice is to discover that more and more and more. To begin with, we only get a glimpse. Could it be? Now, what? Not me. Mucky old me. Couldn't be. But gradually these experiences continue as we chant to the Gonzan until we really realize that our life matches that life that's up there in front of us on that beautiful scroll. So this is what we're seeking, or should be. We should be seeking the Buddha in our hearts. That is the whole purpose of this practice. And furthermore, if you have that seeking, challenging, fighting spirit, to practice exactly as the Buddha taught, to do Gongyo and Daimoku, to do Shakabuku, and to study the Gosho, you will definitely discover it. And fortunately for us, whenever we look back over a year, even sometimes over 6 months, we see that somehow we have grown. We are somehow discovering some new and rather good things about ourselves. And those good things, of course, are the glimpses of the Buddha state. So the Buddha state is in us, isn't it? The process of the human revolution is nothing else but bringing about our conscious minds to actually understand that. Our conscious minds are, the area of our ego, also the area where we think only of the unpleasant bits of our lives or whatever. We can't believe that actually we can be a Buddha. Nichiren Daishonin, Gosho after Gosho after Gosho says, you can achieve exactly the same state of life or condition of life as me. So potentially, Buddhahood is there in everybody. So of course through the practice, by keeping at it, we will inevitably discover it gradually. So the second purpose, I've talked about the seeking mind, which is the main first point of Sesendoji's tale. And the second one is that Taishaku, the god who caught him in his arms and previously had been in the story's beautiful language watching him from the heavens, this represents a test of faith. Taishaku was testing the faith of this young man. Why? We read in the Gosho about tests of faith. Or maybe we've been going through a difficult time and we go to get guidance, and whoever it is we chat to, they say, well, it's really a test of faith, isn't it? That's what that's been all about. So what is the test of faith? Why do we have to go through tests of faith? Because they do occur. So I think it's important to understand that this is the positive function of Sancho-shima. We tend to look on Sancho-shima as an absolute damn nuisance. Sometimes it can really distress us. But we also remember in our minds that famous line from the Gosho where Nichiren Daishonin says, you mustn't be frightened. You mustn't run away because Sancho-shima attacks you. You must go on and you'll overcome it. So the test of faith is, of course, created by this strong, negative, destructive influence that exists in all of our lives. We may be chanting to overcome it. And however hard we try, day after day passes and there's no change. We still seem to be stuck. We don't seem to be getting anywhere. We get distressed. Maybe we begin to doubt the gods. Or we go to a friend or to a senior leader and say, look, I thought I was doing everything I should, but there must be something I'm doing wrong. Because I'm not breaking through this difficult patch or period. So, also in other Gosho, Nichiren Daishonin says, if you're making that 12-day journey to Kamakura, don't stop on the 11th. You must go on. In Gosho after Gosho, he talks about, spring never being followed by autumn or winter. Always being followed, as the seasons go, by the summer, and winter being followed by the spring. Always that encouraged to go on, quotes, no matter what. So this is the test of faith. In other words, through going on, no matter what the obstacles and difficulties that seem to be hemming you in, through going on and not giving up, you are making the cause which will have the effect of breaking through, shedding some unhappy karma, and overcoming, of course, that Sancho-shima in the process. Do you follow? The cause to grow and to earn benefit and joy is to go on, to go on, to go on. And in my experience, when you reach that point where you want to give up or stop, is the very point where if you just go on a little longer, for another day or two, you find you're through. It's like, isn't it? An example is chanting an Asta-mokkha. Sometimes the first 5 minutes is absolute hell, isn't it? You think an hour, how can I do an hour? I mean, by 5 minutes you feel absolutely overwhelmed by the difficulty of doing it. Your knees ache, and your bones hurt, and every sort of difficulty seems to be affecting you, physical and spiritual. But the amazing thing is that if you go on, often just 1 more minute, the next time you look up, it's an hour's gone. An hour's disappeared, just in a flash. In a sense, that crystallizes what I'm talking about. If you go on at that point where you want to give up and stop, that is the point of breakthrough. And the cause to grow and earn benefit is that you give your life and go on for that extra minute or two and break through the sound barrier. Isn't it? Don't you agree? So this is a thing where we really can encourage each other. We have to, don't we? One of the great values of the organization is that when we're battling with that strong negative force, someone or other will say to us, can't you see it's just Sancho Shiva? Can't you see you're going to change karma through this? You know, just keep going. And we make the cause then to accelerate our human revolution and our journey towards really attaining Buddhahood or enlightenment in our own lives. So that is the second point which this beautiful story of Sesendoji illustrates, taking up the challenge. Okay, so now let's just look a little more carefully at some of the lines of this Gosho, and I'll ask Sylvia to read the first paragraph again, if you could.
In the past, Sesendoji was willing to give his life in order to hear that half a verse. How much more thankful should we be to hear a chapter or even a volume of the Lotus Sutra? How can we ever repay such a blessing? Indeed, if you care about your next life, you should make Sesendoji your example. Even though he may be too poor to offer anything of value, if the opportunity should arise to give up your life for the sake of the Buddhist law, you should offer your life in order to study Buddhism.
Thank you. How much more thankful should we be to hear a chapter or even a volume of the Lotus Sutra? How can we ever repay such a blessing? So, as you may know, in Gosho Nichiren Daishonin explains that Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, in those 7 characters, conveys the whole essence of the teaching of the Lotus Sutra. In other words, when we hear Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, we are listening as if to the entire sutra being recited. Furthermore, since the Lotus Sutra contains in its essence all the other 80,000 or so teachings of Buddhism, when we hear Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, we're hearing all 80,000 teachings. So this is what Nichiren Daishonin says, how thankful we can be. Because what are we doing every day we chant Daimoku? If we take the trouble to listen to the Nam-myoho Renge-kyo we're saying, we are listening to all 80,000 teachings of Buddhism, including the entire 28 chapters of the Lotus Sutra. It's like going, on a summer course, on a fresh summer course, or a visit to Tretz or Tozan, every minute of our lives. We are living, in other words, Buddhism in every respect. To hear our Daimoku, to hear it. How many of us hear it? How many of us listen to our Daimoku? More likely, I can't bear this agony anymore, I've been chanting for a boyfriend for so long, thinking about nothing else, but our problems and our difficulties. Well, of course it's all right to pray for our desires, very much so. But equally, we should spare time to listen to our Daimoku. So this is what Vice President Tsuji is, many of you have read his guidance from time to time. This is what he's always saying, isn't it? Feel, he often says, feel